evening, everyone. My name is Asha, and on behalf of Book Soup, I want to welcome you to tonight's event with Cal Hoffman in conversation with Richard Cox discussing Easy to Slip. We have a full calendar of events, so if you want to know what we have coming up in store, including events with Miranda July discussing All Fours, Taylor Jenkins Reid discussing Atmosphere, and a virtual breakfast with Jeremy Allen Lynn, author of Gay Bar, discussing his new book, Deep House. Check out our website, sign up for our newsletter, or follow our social media. A few housekeeping notes. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones right now so there are no interruptions. If you'd like to purchase a copy of the book, you may grab one at the register, right over there where you walked in. Your purchase today supports not only our bookstore, but also this wonderful author and moderator. So thank you. Your support is much appreciated. And now to introduce our special guest. Cal Hoffman is a writer, educator, and actor. He graduated from Catholic University and attended Webber Douglas Academy of Dramatic Art in London and the MFA Fiction Writing program at Columbia University. He has taught English and creative writing to children of immigrants, private school students, and young people in foster care. As an actor, he has performed in regional theater across the country and starred in the acclaimed New York revival of Jules Feiffer's play, Elliot Loves. Cal lives with his wife, Victoria Leacock Hoffman, and their son, Harry, in Washington, D.C. Richard Cox has moved seamlessly from classical theater, Bolingbroke opposite William Hurt in Richard II on Broadway, and film, recently Al Pacino's Lear Rex, off-Broadway hits, Obie Award-winning Moon Children, and Alice in Wonderland opposite Meryl Streep. Broadway musicals winning the coveted Clarence Dorick Award and Tony and Drama Desk nominations for Platinum, and Blood Brothers to feature film Stuart Richards, The Killer, opposite Al Pacino in Cruising, TV Moe's Dershowitz in Norman Mailer's American Tragedy, and miniseries David Siedelman, The Journalist in Robert Altman and Gary Truder's Tanner, which won the grand prize at Cannes, to TV comedy The Family Therapist in Titus, series work, and a huge number of memorable guest stars in every genre. Such as the Soundman's PR, Designing Women, Leverage, Star Trek, NCIS LA, Prospero, The Librarians, and Grey Talbot on Alpha House. Without further ado, please help me give a very warm welcome to Cal and Richard.
Thank you. Just before we start, I want to say how thrilled I am to have been brought into this wonderful world of this book and this extraordinary man. He says somewhere in the book, I love books. You meet the most interesting people there. This dude is amazing, and this book is so full, rich, heartwarming, heartbreaking, laugh aloud, funny at times, soulful journey, and I'm very grateful to be here with you. So we're going to read an excerpt, then we'll chat for a while, and then we'll open things up to questions later. This is an excerpt, Greenwich Village, 1969.
Saturday, March 22nd, 1969, New York City. Down the block, I'm looking through the wrought iron that separates the dead Sephardic Jews from us live numbers out for early Sabbath strolls. We're almost at 6th Avenue when I hear yelling, then laughing, then yelling, seemingly at the same moment, so nasal it makes Danny's wine sound like basso profundo at La Scala. Booby, boobala, where's your Steffi? Where's your Steffala? It's a little guy, squat, husky, shorter than Uncle Danny.
She doesn't shop.
My uncle shouts back across 6th. You poor already?
She buys. All day she buys. I do all the shopping.
Schlopping, mopping. In the market for a hearing or a herring?
I can't afford hearing. Gotta buy a locks.
For Elliot?
How'd you know?
My uncle's crossing the street now, so I follow him. Loose lips like small hips.
Whose hips?
I don't know. What do you think?
Stephanie?
Your Stephanie or my Stephanie?
You want to come? Come.
Gardner gonna be there?
Of course not.
So why should I be there? Look, she's finally getting her rights. The little man's peering down at his wire terrier, who squats on the roots of the only tree planted this square-foot plot of dirt southwest corner of West 11th Street. Good girl. Good girl, he's saying.
You want a part?
My uncle asks. Part smart, he mutters.
Drop by, Danny says. After 10, we might be off Broadway. Tell Stephanie.
No, you tell yours, Stephanie, the man says with a hearty cackle or a cackle in his heart, depending your perspective.
Jealous.
My uncle says as we walk toward 10th. Who's his Stephanie?
My lover in the movies.
Yeah?
Mel thinks it's real.
What if it's real? I ask.
Ah, the great what if, Stanislavski. Your aunt Shakespearean. She'll only murder me.
Hungry! Helen's looking down again from the 6th floor. Danny, I'm hungry! Comes her shriek from the tower.
Detention center. Helen! Quiet!
My uncle yells up to her.
It's Shabbos. We're sorry.
Bring me lox, cheapskate.
You gonna refrigerate? You'll be hungry all week.
So bring prosciutto.
Prosciutto. Your husband, Hal, Danny pleads. He'll never forgive me.
He married me, you dummy. But we're already half a block past, in a split second, walking straight into the grocery. Tiles and mirrors sparkling. Clean as newly opened Moët. All this rude, illogical shouting about marriage and Stephanie's gets me thinking. Questions popping like disorderly champagne corks. So I asked Danny about the first guy, the little guy. Why he's so crazy funny. My uncle says he's always on, because he's a writer, a comedy writer.
He's on, Danny explains. Everything with him is loaded.
He's funny looking, I say.
Harmless but vain. Makes him paranoid. This thing about the two Stephanies? He wants bed with my wife.
What? I ask.
Get in bed.
My uncle states flatly.
With dear Aunt Stephanie.
Danny turns, looks me straight in the eyes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. You're too young.
For what?
Understanding. Don't mean an insult. Wish I was young.
I suppose Danny really does wish he was young. But boy, he's a dummy. I get the whole thing. Temptations, infidelity, the jokes. The whole draggy kahuna, I get it. And this is another big reason I love my uncle. He's always telling me things I'm supposed to be too young for, and they're fun to hear about. Less than 24 hours, here we are again, talking stuff over, standing in front of this effervescent clean counter. Eduardo's already finished slicing the lox. He slides it across, packed up in waxed white deli paper. He looks me straight in the eye.
He's a big joker, he says.
Who, I ask.
Cream cheese? Eduardo adds, an upward inflected accent on the cheese. Plain and with chives. Pint each, Danny closes, turning down the center aisle of store.
I follow. The jars, cans, and boxes are smaller than at the Giant in Washington, but they have funny-sounding names, shipped in from elusive, expensive countries. My uncle picks Wilkin & Son's 3 Fruits Marmalade, and when we get to the checkout, I pick up the jar and read the label. It's Tiptree medium cut, lemon, orange, and grapefruit, mixed to a thick, chewy gold. Dark as Coca-Cola, not translucent orange like the Smucker's Dad buys. The Coca-Cola, the candy rack at checkout has Hershey's milk chocolate and Hershey's almond bars, but instead of Milky Way and Three Musketeers, here are miniatures of Callard and Bowser's toffee, plain chocolate and licorice, and the hard butterscotch as well. There's halva on the rack, 5-color rainbow jellies, and those British wafer-style mints, rolled up tight in white paper with green lettering, foils circling both ends. Danny buys a box of Callard and Bowser's and gives it to me. The cashier rings everything. Before it totals, my uncle says, put it on our tab, takes out a 5, then gives it to her before everything gets bagged. Danny even helps with the bagging. Thanks, Mr. Governor, she says, and we're out the door. We're off.
Let's walk up 5th.
My uncle says.
Don't want to pass Women's House. You know the word tomorrow?
Yeah, what's with tomorrow?
Favorite curse of the Beats. It's when we bring Helen food. Gotta take her pastry. Gotta last all week.
I'm trying to chuckle, help Danny feel better, but realize the little guy walking the poodle is funnier than I'll ever be. Why bother? When this black feeling comes over me, pure unadulterated shame, the humiliation only 10-year-old boys feel. Sitting back of our VW station wagon, Mom complaining Danny's married a high-class call girl, and Dad says, yeah, dances for New York City ballet, if not high, at least it's upper middle class.
Her family, they barely said a word to us, Mom says.
Well, they're Irish. They're Catholic. They're Irish Catholics. It's quiet for a minute. My mom and dad considering the full significance of this particular derivation.
Her father, Dad says, he just got a degree in library science. He's going to work at Butler Library at Columbia.
Didn't I work at Butler Library at Columbia? I'm either getting ahead or just really getting behind my story. Either way, the difference is 8 years, and dead serious. It's utter, complete loss, I imagine.
Can you imagine, Mom says? Age 48, Fred Guinan gets his MLS, 25 years at Beck Dinner Mills, and he goes back to school to become a librarian?
Must be money in the family, Dad says.
You think?
The house.
All right, Mom says.
I'm trying to sleep. Joshua curled up next to me in the back seat. 50 plus bottles Moet, 8 tiers of lemon vanilla cake. And the dreamy yellow convertible Danny and new Aunt Steffi jump into at 5:30, driving into the Chappaqua dusk like lusty, heartsick teenagers. My parents say such things.
Here, take Subway.
My uncle hands over the leash.
Cal wanted me to say just a couple of words about the women's house and that neighborhood around there, which I grew up in. I would pass women's house on my way back from St. Luke's School in the village, and it was a house of detention. Sometimes there were people in there for a couple of days, just detention. Other people were there for much longer and were angrier and further out, and you would hear these blood-curdling screams as you walk by. Are you enjoying your cheese Danish? Bring me one of those. You know, and the hand would come out and the finger would come out of the bars, and the school kids just took it in passing. It was part of the neighborhood. This was smack in the middle of Greenwich Village, and around it was bubbling with the most wonderful energy, the most full of possibilities. This great bohemian off-Broadway and music scene down there. There were theaters right and left. By the way, they were affordable. You could afford a ticket at an off-Broadway theater in those days. And I was just a couple of years from getting a large loft for $150. You know, things are a little different right now. But there was the Sheridan Square Playhouse and the Cherry Lane, and there was all these theaters that were off Broadway that were coming up. You know, the Wooster Group and Andre Gregory's work with the Manhattan Project, and there was the Living Theater, of course, which just a couple of years before, Al Pacino and his buddy Marty Sheen were janitors watching rehearsals of The Brig and saying, "I want to do that. That's the kind of thing I want to be doing." And it was just very exciting time. People mixing and talking and going to each other's events, and it was a wonderful mulligatawny soup of creative energy. And those are those streets that Cal and his uncle were walking through, yelling across 6th Avenue to Mel Brooks. I'm not supposed to say any actual names, but a guy, a husky guy on the other side of who might just have been Mel Brooks. And that was the scene. You might tell us how that fits into the book as a whole, and where you were
Well, this
coming
is a memory, and happens in chapter 2, and it happens in March of 1969. To understand the thoughts that the character's having, you have to go back to the earlier memory that's in the book of August 1968, and an even earlier memory that's in the book of June, well, actually April, May of 1968 through June, where my father took me to Resurrection City where there was a Poor People's Campaign that happened right after Martin Luther King was assassinated. And it was a lot of poor people came up from all over the South. White coal miners from Kentucky and West Virginia, a lot of black sharecroppers. They built a city on the mall. So we went down one afternoon for 4 or 5 hours. My father served 4 years in the Korean War, got a PhD, and you have to know his father was the breadwinner of the family at age 8. And my father's grandfather went back to get the rest of the family in Russia and never returned. So there was kind of and this is true of a lot of families in this period, there was an existential urgency about earning one's livelihood and becoming American. So my grandfather came in August, and we were watching the Democratic Convention. Kids were getting beaten up on television. Fresh in my mind was the assassination of Robert Kennedy, because they shut down Resurrection City. Sirhan got everyone who was trying to change America fired, basically. And my father and mom bought a house for $28,000. My father was working for the Social Security Administration. So my grandfather came to visit. And, my father had been the pressured first son. His brother was kind of the forgotten son in New York. Never really, I don't know if Harry visited him ever in New York. But then after a lot of artistic work, 10 years work, he had a noteworthy success. And so when my grandfather came, he told my dad he was making peanuts and he should, give it up. He was a loser. And even kind of suggested he maybe should try, being a producer in the film business. Not a good fit for my dad. I'm not passing any judgments on film producers, but my father would have had a difficult time doing that. That kind of pressure stayed alive, but essentially what I recall is my parents started to fight. I share these memories in the book, and I was more self-referential than most kids. I thought I hadn't done enough. I was under my father was a hard-driving dad, and I went to a public school when we got there, and then I got into Sidwell Friends, and there was a lot of pressure to do well. Washington, D.C. has always been that way. So then my uncle got married, and I think my parents were really feeling pressure and disengagement and strain in their marriage. My father was feeling like he had lost his place that he'd worked so hard for. My uncle was marrying someone who he had broken up with, and that it's mentioned in chapter 1, actually, because my uncle got a very bad burn, and he was let go from a big break as an understudy on a Broadway play, and so he split up, and they were split up for a whole year, and then they got back together after The Graduate. So there were reasons for my parents' conversation in the car, though I have to say, it's also, you know, in 1968, all through the 60s, to marry outside of your faith was not a small thing. And people, there's kind of a myth that Jewish families, you hear this in shul, that there's, you know, openness and togetherness, and there's all the, but both sides of my family, on my mom's side, they went to Communist Worker Party meetings on Fridays. I have Lenin's collected works on my bookshelf. It was my grandfather's, and Marx's works. And my grandmother worked in a sweatshop, and my grandfather. And on my father's side, my grandfather, you know, he was driving a bicycle in winter in Chicago when he was 8, making, you know, he was the breadwinner, and he labored that way his whole life, I think, up until he got older. So, there was a lot of among Jewish immigrants. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of, I think, more rivalries and betrayals and competition and thorny interpersonal relationships than most people care to admit. I mean, I never wanted to date a Jewish girl because of my experience growing up, because it was just the families were fraught with problems. So you know, I'm just sharing that because, and in fact, I couldn't read Jewish writers till later in life. It reminded me too much of my own family, you know, and so that's memories alluded to, and then came this is a long section where I went up and spent the weekend in New York, and I was 11, and it was just a completely, it was like completely new world. I'd never seen anything like it. And Women's House at Detention, I think my uncle actually had a friend who was there, and brought her food. And there's also scenes where we go to a bakery hidden way on this, out in the East Village. And it was someone from the Mideast. It was like his home. It wasn't a licensed bakery. What delicious baked goods it was. I mean, everyone, what was extraordinary, what I remember about New York in the late 60s was everyone had this unique work they did that they shared with other people. Either, you know, as actors, or there was a whole, you know, community of poets and writers. I loved that film, A Complete Unknown, and I know a lot of people. I mean, I went to a packed theater to see it, and people went. We have a friend, Mike Isikoff, who's a journalist. He went twice. He's older than me, but that showed that world pretty well, I thought. I mean, but the immigrant bakers had their work. I mean, and everyone mixed. There wasn't a separation, and you know, I mean, there was a jeweler, you know, there were, you know, shoemakers. There was all kinds of stuff, and it was very accessible, and it's still there. You know, it's not a world we've lost. It's just that it'd be nice to recover it, wouldn't it?
It'd be nice if the rents were low enough for us to.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be nice. It would be nice if people started to nurture that sense of
community.
Yeah, and of inclusion. You know, so yeah.
And then there are different times that weave it through this narrative style that is quite extraordinary. And the novel actually begins.
It begins
later.
The novel begins at Columbia, and I tell you, this feeling of shame I carried with me to Columbia because I was, the character Danny was filming a movie on campus, and I literally avoided it. I didn't want to, I was, because of the problems with my parents, I spent most of my middle school and high school years in the library. I was in plays. I didn't have a good social life. I was very unhappy. I couldn't wait to leave and go to college. I was very isolated, and I wasn't even really aware of how isolated I was. So I got to college. I wanted to be on my own. The last thing I wanted was to have to, So I avoided that set. But one day I'm in my room and someone's rapping on my door, and it's one of my classmates. He said, "Hey, that's your uncle. Your uncle's from me. He told me to come get you." And I tell you, I talked him into going to the dining hall and having dinner, not go and say hi. So I had that, I think, very healthy instinct to have my year, and be a clump, be on my own. And yet, in the back of my mind, when I was alone in the winter working at the Wimpeys, which I was happy to, there's something about kids having their own life. It's so important. That was a wonderful thing about the 60s and 70s. So I had this inner monologue that I didn't deserve, that I was in New York because I wanted to be somehow, close to my uncle or part of his circle, and I had worked on a play all over town for a whole month, and actually met the person who kind of motivated me to want to be at Columbia and study to be a writer, Joseph Heller. So I had all these natural positive impulses that I was feeling total shame about.
Lack of entitlement.
Huh?
Lack of entitlement.
No. I was filled with a lot of misgivings about my own myself.
Yeah.
So I felt like I should have gone to University of Chicago, and I don't deserve to be here. And so I was getting A's in 4 junior level courses. I was working in the mailroom, and so the opening incident starts the book as I find myself passed out on the floor of a lecture hall in the School of International Affairs. I don't know how I got there. I hear a truck pass up Amsterdam and see the lights, and I feel this sense of kind of injury. So I remember I cut my foot when I was 5. I bashed my head on pavement when I was 10. And then I walk back to the dorm and I see the etchings on the metal where you push the buttons, and there are words there, and there are words on plastic, and I interpret all of them as being about me. I have ridden the elevator. That night I realized all those words are about me. And I walked past there was a guy who, had an ongoing party every night. Door was open. I heard them talking. I thought they were catcalling about me. I stood at the door of my friend, and I imagined that this junior who lived down the hall, I had a girlfriend who I met the 3rd day of orientation. We went out, and it was a really nice relationship for about 5 weeks, and then he asked her out. So, and then she broke up with him, and I imagined he had put wires in the wall. And so this just happened with it was as if the heavens parted and craziness rained down that night. And I didn't sleep. And the thing is, the more you try to figure it out and deny yourself a feeling, because it made me angry, but I didn't feel like I deserved to be angry about anything. It's part of the imagining these things. you displace your own anger outside, and because it's easier, it's more comfortable. So then if you perceive it, you get more angry, and then you project it again. So it's a cycle. It gets worse, and it gets more and more intense. Finally, I'm forced out of the dorm. It's 4 a.m., and I'm standing on the cobblestones under the Columbia Gate, and it's quiet. There's like but there's a light on and chock full of nuts. They're setting up, and it was beautiful, really, chock full of nuts. And Columbia itself in 1975, 76 was just a beautiful place. The Upper West Side, it's kind of wild and unkempt and not crowded, and so they're setting up, and it's the idea of beauty in the commonplace. That's when I started to go back to memory, and the first memories in the book are from Baltimore, just mainly memories of my mom, but the memories interspersed with what I'm seeing in the city throughout the first 36 hours. I walked through New York for 36 hours straight, all the way to page 171. And that's really the first act of the book. The memories are a source of connectedness and of strength. There's some good memories. There's also memories that are very mixed, and there's some bad memories. But I started to go to the memories right away because, and this has to do with my writing process as well as the character's thought process. When I realized I was going crazy, I really instinctively said, how do I get well? And that was what motivated me and it's really every sentence, every page through the entire book. As a writer, if you're writing about something, you want to frame the most difficult question you can, something you'll never answer. Because if you answer it, you want to leave it open so that the reader can come to their own feelings and their own answers. You want to give them that freedom to interact with your text that way. So you find a really difficult question. That's a very tough question. But the question also, it not only drives the narrative, it's like a super objective or a point of concentration in Stanislavski. It roots you. So what it helps you do is it helps you just have thoughts come to you unbidden. So every time I sat down, I would have the question, I'd start writing, and I just let whatever came to mind. I would set down on paper. I started with 1,100 pages. And a lot of what I wrote in that first 1,100 pages mistakenly was edited out, and I brought back maybe a third to half of it for the final draft. So it was a very valuable process. It was a lot of fun. When I'm working on a fourth novel now, I've written a second one, halfway through a third. So, but I always have a question I'm trying to answer, even if it's from a third person point of view. But then it's invaluable to sit in front of the computer and then just whatever comes to mind, you put down on, you want to write whatever comes to mind. I know the characters, and I do a lot of research, so I know the characters and the events that are going to be in the story, but I don't outline. It's because I think then you're shutting down that unconscious, and the unconscious is where you start to understand things.
Do you think the memories the precision of the memories are mind-blowing to me? On that initial when you walk 36 hours around Manhattan, the memories are so specific, and I always wonder about the nature of memory, whether it's part imagination and part specific memory? Do we create a history? And do you let the imagination in? And importantly, Cal said earlier today that it was very crucial for him that those early memories, those seminal memories, were positive ones in Baltimore. It could be the other way around. If you grow up in a concentration camp and your first memories are anguish, it may be a different route around, but it was very important to you.
What Richard's saying is actually, a really good clinical psychiatrist would say, that's what saved me. So it's interesting you identified that, because I had a lot of good things in my life prior to maybe, the bad stuff happened when I was 10 or 11, but you can untangle and you can figure out those kinds of things. You already, if you've got some good years at the beginning. So I don't know how we are for time, but the next section of the book goes. I tried to finish exams. I couldn't. I go back to my high school, my classes in senior year, and I graduated, and I had a really good relationship with a classmate for about a week or two, but it allowed me to realize I needed some help. But my father's the one who took me to a clinic, a Sibley Hospital, for 2 weeks. But the disassociation was already far on its way. So, and this is a book, what I really, I wanted to be, scrupulously accurate with all the memories and with what happened at Columbia, and then when I came back for graduation. So it's every scene is taken from life, but I do allow myself to find the meanings or the subtleties or the emotions or the subtext within that.
Memory is an important theme here, and it brought up for me when I was reading it. It's a James Joyce quote that I shared with you. What is clear and concise can't deal with reality, for to be real is to be surrounded in mystery. And Cal writes in the book, he's talking to his uncle about a girlfriend. At one point, he shares his feelings about her, but he then has misgivings. He says, sharing my secret with Danny, it suddenly feels all too sensible and a lot less real somehow. And that disconnect between what makes sense and what is real is fascinating to me.
Wordsworth, I think, was the first one who came up with this aesthetic notion of negative capability. And the idea is to faithfully depict reality. Reality is filled with ambiguity and uncertainty and not knowing. So you have to be fully accepting of that state as when you're writing. You can't sit down and decide to write. You have to be accepting of the ambiguity, the not knowing, and just put down whatever you perceive. That was the romantic aesthetic notion that Wordsworth, and then Joyce, I think, is restating it as well. But in life too, if you aren't accepting of ambiguity or uncertainty, as in day-to-day living, you're not going to get very far. So I couldn't cope with any uncertainty or ambiguity.
You want to talk about how they helped you in the hospital navigate that?
Yeah. So what you bring up about the early part of life, I had really good luck because I had all this disassociation. I quickly I had a severe illness. I mean, and you wake up and you're hearing things all day, and you just can't think clearly anymore, and you can't perceive clearly anymore. And the more you try to understand it and untangle it and have it make sense, the worse it gets. And it didn't end, and I thought it would never end. So we found, and I will tell you, my mother fought tooth and nail with doctors who, there was one person who, the husband of a woman who worked at the Congressional Budget Office. My father was a very, he felt he was a very prominent psychiatrist. And he called my mother and he said, this is a chronic condition. You got to give him Thorazine, and he might be able to manage on his own, but the sooner you accept this, the better. And he thought he was doing our family a favor. My mom said, "Fuck you," and there were. That's actually happens a lot to people in this situation. That's why I bring it up, not as a point of pride, but because I think there's the other danger is, an illness is something that the individual ultimately is responsible for, and until you take ownership of what's happening to you, and have the humility to say, I need to do a lot of work here, and maybe I've made the wrong, maybe I've been, thinking about things in the wrong way, or maybe I really need to adjust my thinking and my relation to people. And until you do that, you're not going to help yourself. So you have to have a degree of humility. My family had some humility that I think was kind of extraordinary. They were willing to say, God, this accident, how this happened? What did we do wrong? Because I was just this hardworking. I got into Columbia and University of Chicago when I was a junior. I was hardworking. I got A's. I was just I kind of bent over backwards to be a good kid. That was a big problem. Because if you can't just be a kid, you're gonna have difficulty on 1135, on the 11th floor of John Jay Hall, with a lot of mainly juniors who are getting high and wanting to get laid and shooting comments, and so there were real reasons I had the difficulty, but then when it unraveled, it was because of life experience. It was not. I think all psychiatric illnesses are because of life experience. People are trying to deny that because it takes time. If that's your view, then it takes time to figure it out and get well. But I was at a hospital started by the first gay psychoanalyst, Harry Stack Sullivan, and that was his life work. And Frida Fromm-Reichman was there. It was a great place. 30 to 40% left there, and they were well. And they were beyond. There was a girl on my floor who sat in a chair, didn't talk, didn't speak, for a year and a half. And the doctor came every day and worked with her and talked to her, and did some detective work, and these things take a lot of time and a lot of, more than anything, it takes. The people at this hospital were really nice people, and I love the patients too, because I had a community. When I see people not understand what psychiatric illness is and cast aspersions on people with illnesses, it touches something in me, because I knew so many good people, fellow patients, some of whom didn't get well, but they all were nice people. And the staff was nice. The staff really worked with people. Frieda from Reichman was there. I Never Promised You a Rose Garden is written by Joanne Greenberg. She was Frieda from Reichman's patient. My doctor worked in a similar way. The young woman I'm talking about who was catatonic, she had a doctor who worked that way. And about 8 years after I saw her in her room, maybe 4 years later, she left the hospital. I think it was like 1985. I got a wedding announcement from her. She was living in New Jersey, and she got married. Now, we're probably going to be running out of time soon, but I wanted to add one thing, or two things. This was a private hospital. It wasn't that expensive. There were state hospitals all over the country that did work like this. There was the state hospital in Queens. There was an exhibit at the Queens Museum of Art. They had a big art studio. Lots of really good art. Many of those people went back to New York City and worked as artists. And that was a state hospital. There were a lot of other state hospitals that good. They were funded. The government funded hospitals. They respected psychiatrists. The psychiatrists worked with patients. They did psychodynamic therapy. They talked about their life experiences. And I did this work with patients at Columbia Presbyterian in New York City. Dominican American women, largely. I had a storytelling group. They all had stories. They wrote in English or in Spanish. Beautiful stories. And they started to understand why they had to go to the clinic. And, you know, I might still be doing that work if it was a better system. But the next clinic I was at was, I don't like to talk about negative things, but it was just horrible. It was hard to work there because you had like hundreds of patients with hardly any structure. But so what I'm just trying to share is there's a whole world that of people have lost sight of the reality of illness, and if they trusted traditional American medicine, traditional American psychiatry, I mean, people like Harry Stack Sullivan, Frieda from Reichman, the work they did is recent, 40, 50 years ago, and the funding would be fairly easy to organize, and it would help. It would really help. So
She thinks we should open up.
You'd have to question.
okay.
Okay. So, anybody would like to ask a question?
It's called Easy to Slip because I think it not only could happen to anybody, but the hospital only takes up the last 60 pages of the book, and the book is really about a young man growing up wanting to have intimacy, and by that I mean, wanting to have social emotional kind of intimacy, which people have attributed other things to the word, but the word comes from the Greek root, what's inside, and sharing what's inside. Now people hear intimacy, they think sex or something, but sex is where people usually go to avoid intimacy, or, as a way to control a relationship. The kind of intimacy that I think is, that I wanted, and I wanted it from women, but also with men, is just an openness and connectedness, and so that's what a lot of the book is just about. That, because I wasn't able to achieve that.
And this walkabout
Yeah.
of his
Yeah.
is all of our walkabouts, I
Yeah.
think. I don't think it ever stops. You know that some of you may have loved that Nicholas Roeg film Walkabout. You know, I mean in the Aboriginal sense. We're all on a walkabout, I think, maybe our whole lives. We don't know why we're here and where we're going and stuff. And why some of the people that you thought would get well didn't get well, and some that you couldn't dream would get well did, like your catatonic friend, you know. It's all kind of part of that mystery that we that you and Joyce, you know, right?
I sadly didn't know anyone who didn't get well, because if they weren't getting well, that you couldn't get to know them so easily. It was that bad. But they were all gentle, sweet people. The other thing our culture has done, unfortunately, we've lost the sight that, psychiatric illnesses they become sometimes neurological. And Harry Stack Sullivan believed everyone was good. And he separated psychiatric illnesses from aggression and character disorders, which is essential, because character disorders are intractable. You can't really treat them in a medical way. They come when people, for whatever reason, grow up without a sense of boundaries or a moral framework, and where people are just without a sense of right and wrong. And you can't do much. There were people with character disorders, and you'll see they're in the book. But that's a whole separate thing. And if people started to make that distinction, we'd have a better world. We'd have a safer world, and medicine would be better as well. So, yeah.
Any last questions?
Any questions? Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
You seem very self-aware of yourself, but what did you learn about yourself by writing this?
This really came home through getting to know the last Richard and Ari last night, and then John Burnham Schwartz, because we had long personal conversations. So it used to bother me that I hadn't started writing when I got to Catholic University, and because I did write. I won an award for one of my articles, and wrote an article about a prison, and I actually spent a whole day down in the prison on my own. I could have stayed there a week. It's in the prologue. It was kind of a nice world in 1982. People just mixed, so I had that. Perhaps I could have decided to do writing. And that bothered me previous. But what I've kind of realized is, I loved acting, and it gave me a life with people. I was in a lot of plays, and I met several long-term girlfriends. It was almost like getting married, but without the responsibility. That sustained me for a long time, and it was a nice thing, because you learn a lot when you're in your 20s. It's maybe hard to sit in a room, and even in your 30s. So, but that's something I only came to recently. I was also able to accept. Because I loved acting. I worked hard at it, and I didn't quite make it. I did a show. I got a really nice review from Linda Weiner, Elliot Loves. Said our production was better than Mike Nichols' production, but it didn't matter. What I was able to realize is, my calling was to be a writer. It wasn't to be an actor, and I wasn't really a force of nature, but it was a great thing in my life, and I just to have that kind of acceptance of how things have gone since. that's what the book has. It's helped me accept what my life has been since. Somehow, it sounds counterintuitive, but the book, I kind of already knew what's in the book. The process of writing, you get your characters, your action, your question, and then you just let it come out of you, and then it's already stuff you already know. At least for me, it's a subconscious process more than anything, and that makes it's a whole lot of fun. It's more for me. It's more fun than acting.
Thank you for writing this
Yeah.
amazing.
So-
It's a rich, rewarding ride.
Yeah.
He'll be signing copies of the book in that direction.
Give it up for Cal and Richard. That was really special, you guys. Thank you both. That was really fun. Now we are going to proceed with the signing. No.
Yeah. I'm getting a t-shirt writing thing now also.
How are you?
Nice to meet you. How are you? All right. All good. Congrats.
Thank you.
And we're on more behind the calendar.
You're. No.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
You want to make it out to Adriana?